Picture a city of gold, glittering under an endless sun, its towers reaching toward the heavens, and its streets alive with the echoes of 1,000 forgotten voices. For a moment, it stands as the pinnacle of human achievement, a place of unimaginable wealth, wisdom, and wonder. Then, in the blink of an eye, it's gone. Swallowed by the sea, buried beneath desert sands, or simply faded into myth, leaving behind little more than whispers on the wind and a legacy shrouded in mystery. This is the powerful allure of mythological cities, places that captured our ancestors' dreams, only to vanish without a trace, teasing us with questions that have lingered for centuries. What is it about these lost civilizations that continues to haunt our collective imagination? Why do we find ourselves drawn, again and again, to stories of golden cities like El Dorado, sunken empires like Atlantis, or hidden utopias like Shangri-La? These are more than just tales, they are mirrors reflecting our deepest hopes, our greatest fears, and our unending curiosity about the unknown. They speak to something fundamental within us, the desire to believe that there are still wonders left in this world, secrets waiting just beyond the edge of the map, mysteries that defy explanation. In many ways, these stories are a testament to human ambition itself, the drive to build, to explore, and to imagine, even when faced with the inevitability of loss. In this video, we're setting out on a journey to uncover the secret origins of these mythological cities. We'll traverse ancient texts, decode archaeological clues, and dive into the rich tapestry of cultural myths that have kept these legends alive across generations. From the advanced civilization of Atlantis, described by Plato more than 2,000 years ago, to the tranquil valleys of Shangri-La, born from a novelist's dream during a time of global uncertainty, we'll explore not only where these stories came from but what they say about us, the storytellers. By the end, you'll have a deeper understanding of how these enigmatic tales have shaped history, influenced modern culture, and continue to inspire explorers, artists, and dreamers to this very day. So come along, let's step into the world of myth and memory, and unravel the secrets of civilizations lost to time. There's something deeply compelling about a story that remains unfinished, a tale where the final chapter is missing, leaving us to wonder what truly happened. Think of history itself as an immense, intricate puzzle spread out across the table of time. Most pieces fit together neatly, forming a clear picture of past events, dynasties, and discoveries. But then there are those gaping holes where a few crucial pieces seem to have vanished completely. Mythological cities are exactly that, the absent fragments of our shared human story. They represent the mysteries we haven't solved, the questions we're still asking, and the possibilities that linger just beyond the edge of factual record. Across continents and cultures, from the ancient Greeks to indigenous South American tribes, people have told stories of magnificent cities that soared to greatness only to disappear without a trace. These narratives tap into something universal within the human spirit. They aren't just about loss, they're profound commentaries on our own nature. Many of these legends serve as cautionary tales about hubris, the dangerous pride that leads a civilization to believe it's invincible, often followed by a sudden, dramatic fall. Others speak to our deep-seated fear of disaster, whether natural or divine, that can erase even the mightiest of kingdoms in an instant. And then there are those that embody our eternal search for paradise, a hidden sanctuary of peace, wisdom, and immortality, a place untouched by the struggles and sorrows of the ordinary world. The renowned mythologist Joseph Campbell explored this recurring pattern in his concept of the monomyth, or the hero's journey, which appears in stories from every corner of the globe. He suggested that these archetypal narratives, including the tales of lost cities, share a common structure because they emerge from the deepest layers of the human psyche. They aren't merely entertainment, they're symbolic expressions of our collective hopes, fears, and existential questions. A city that vanishes becomes more than a historical footnote, it transforms into a powerful symbol. It might represent a lost golden age, a warning against moral decay, or the unending human quest for a better, more perfect world. Consider the legendary city of El Dorado. What began as a misunderstood ritual of the Muisca people in Colombia, a chief covered in gold dust who offered treasures to a sacred lake, morphed in the European imagination into an entire city paved with gold. Conquistadors embarked on perilous, often fatal expeditions through unforgiving jungles, driven by a greed so powerful it blurred the line between reality and fantasy. Their relentless pursuit shows how a story can evolve from a seed of truth into a grand mythological narrative, fueled by human desire. On the other side of the world, in the Celtic traditions of Cornwall, lies the story of Lyoness, a land said to have stretched from the mainland into the Atlantic Ocean, now buried beneath the waves. This sunken kingdom, often associated with the Arthurian legends, is remembered as a place of great beauty and chivalry that met a tragic end. It embodies themes of romantic loss and the relentless power of nature, a melancholic echo of a world that exists now only in memory and song. So what is it that drives us to keep searching for places that might not even exist? Perhaps it's the thrill of the unknown, the possibility that there are still great discoveries to be made. Or maybe it's a deeper, more philosophical yearning to connect with a purer, more ideal version of human civilization, a reminder that greatness is possible, even if it's fleeting. These stories challenge us to look beyond the map, to question what we think we know about the past, and to keep alive the sense of wonder that defines our species. But what exactly makes a city mythological rather than simply lost or forgotten? It's a crucial distinction that lies at the heart of our fascination. A lost historical city like Pompeii or the Mayan city of Tikal was once a very real place. Its disappearance is a tragedy of history, often explained by volcanic eruption, war, or economic decline, and its rediscovery is a matter of archaeological evidence, crumbling walls, buried artifacts, and ancient bones. A mythological city, however, exists in a far more elusive realm. It is a place born primarily from story, woven into the fabric of culture through oral tradition, religious texts, and literature, often endowed with supernatural qualities or impossible grandeur. These are not just cities that were lost, they are cities that live on as powerful ideas. The renowned historian of religion Mircea Eliade argued that myths are not falsehoods but rather profound expressions of a society's collective consciousness. They are sacred stories that explain our origins, our place in the world, and our ultimate destiny. A mythological city serves as a perfect vessel for these big questions. It becomes a cultural touchstone, representing our highest ideals or our deepest fears. It can be a utopian model of a perfect society, a cautionary tale about divine punishment for arrogance, or a symbolic representation of a lost golden age. These stories give form to abstract concepts, making them tangible and memorable across generations. We can identify a few key characteristics that set these legendary places apart. First is their origin in oral tradition. Long before they were ever written down, these stories were passed from one generation to the next around campfires and in village squares. With each telling, details could shift, events could become more dramatic, and the cities themselves could grow more magnificent or more terrifying. This process of embellishment is not a corruption of the truth, but rather the engine of myth making itself, refining the story into its most potent and symbolic form. This leads directly to the second characteristic, profound symbolic significance. The city is almost never just a city. Atlantis is not merely a sunken island, it is a symbol of hubris and the sudden wrath of the gods. Shangri-La is not just a hidden valley, it represents humanity's timeless yearning for peace, wisdom, and escape from a troubled world. El Dorado is not a simple place of wealth, it embodies the destructive power of greed and the folly of conquest. These places carry weight far beyond their physical description, serving as moral compass points for the cultures that cherish their stories. Finally, these cities exist in a space where the line between fact and fiction is intentionally blurred. Some mythological cities, like the Troy of Homer's Iliad, have a strong basis in historical reality. For centuries, Troy was considered pure myth until archaeologists like Heinrich Schliemann uncovered its very real walls, proving that a great city had indeed stood there and likely faced a great war. Yet the Troy of legend, with its Trojan horse and dueling gods, remains a mythological construct built upon a historical foundation. On the other end of the spectrum lies a place like Avalon, the mystical island from Arthurian legend. Unlike Troy, Avalon has no clear historical counterpart. It is a purely symbolic realm, an otherworldly place of healing and magic where King Arthur's sword was forged and where he was taken to recover from his wounds. Its power derives not from a potential archaeological discovery, but from its enduring role as a symbol of hope, renewal, and the mystical connection between our world and the next. Understanding this spectrum, from the historically plausible to the purely imaginative, is essential as we delve into the secret origins of these captivating civilizations. Of all the legendary cities that have captured our imagination, none stands taller or sinks deeper into mystery than Atlantis. The story of this advanced island civilization comes to us from the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, who described it in two of his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, written around 360 BCE. He paints a picture of a formidable naval power that existed 9,000 years before his own time, a paradise of concentric rings of water and land, brimming with rare metals, lush vegetation, and magnificent architecture. Its people, the Atlanteans, were initially a noble and virtuous race, blessed by the gods with immense wealth and knowledge, but over centuries their moral character decayed. They became greedy, arrogant, and aggressive, launching a failed campaign to conquer the ancient world. It was this hubris that led to their divine punishment. In a single terrible day and night of fire and earthquakes, the entire island was swallowed by the sea, vanishing forever into the ocean depths. But why did Plato tell this story? Scholars have debated his intentions for millennia. Many argue that Atlantis was never meant to be understood as a real place. Instead, it was a powerful allegory, a philosophical fable about the inevitable decay of an ideal society. Plato was deeply concerned with defining justice and the traits of a perfect state, as seen in his other famous work, The Republic. Atlantis could have served as the negative counterpart to his vision of Athens, a cautionary tale about what happens when a civilization abandons virtue for material wealth and military ambition. It was a metaphor for the cyclical nature of history, where even the greatest empires are susceptible to collapse from within due to their own moral failings. Yet, another compelling theory suggests Plato might have been weaving his allegory around a kernel of historical truth. The most prominent candidate is the catastrophic volcanic eruption that obliterated the Minoan civilization on the island of Thera, modern-day Santorini, around 1600 BCE. This was one of the largest volcanic events in human history, triggering tsunamis that would have devastated coastal settlements across the Aegean Sea, including parts of Crete. The Minoans were an advanced, sophisticated culture with sprawling palace complexes and extensive trade networks, a description that echoes Plato's account of Atlantean prosperity. Could the memory of this sudden, apocalyptic disaster have been passed down through generations, eventually reaching Plato and inspiring his grand tale of a sunken empire. The hunt for a physical Atlantis has become a relentless pursuit, driving historians and adventurers to propose locations stretching across the globe. Some researchers point to the Mediterranean, suggesting islands like Sardinia or Cyprus, or even the sunken city of Helike off the coast of Greece. Others look to the Atlantic Ocean, noting that Plato described Atlantis as being beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which are the modern Straits of Gibraltar. This has led to speculation about places like the Azores archipelago or the Canary Islands. More fringe theories have placed it in the Americas, the Caribbean, or even Antarctica, often based on imaginative interpretations of geographical features and ancient myths. Each new theory adds another layer to the legend, proving that our desire to find a tangible location for this lost world is as powerful as the story itself. This enduring mystery is what gives Atlantis its timeless power. We are left to wonder, was it a philosophical construct, a brilliant thought experiment designed to make us examine our own society? Or was it a distorted memory of a real prehistoric catastrophe, a cultural echo of one of humanity's most traumatic events? Perhaps it is both. Atlantis lives on because it taps into a fundamental human anxiety, the fear that everything we build, no matter how grand or advanced, is ultimately temporary, vulnerable to the whims of nature or the flaws in our own character. Its grandeur and its sudden, dramatic demise serve as the ultimate story of rise and fall, a theme that resonates as strongly today as it did in ancient Athens. While Atlantis was born from the philosophical mind of Plato, our next legendary land emerged from the notebooks of 19th-century scientists, only to escape into the realm of pure fantasy. The story of Limuria begins not with poets or prophets, but with geologists and biologists grappling with a fascinating puzzle. In the 1860s, scientists like Philip Sclater noticed a peculiar pattern in the natural world. The fossil record showed striking similarities between the animals of India and those of Madagascar, particularly a type of small, primitive primate called a lemur. Yet, these creatures were found nowhere in between. How could these species have migrated across the vast expanse of the Indian Ocean? The prevailing theory of the time, before the acceptance of plate tectonics, was land bridges, ancient connections between continents that had since sunk beneath the waves. Sclater proposed that a massive continent, which he named Limuria after its most famous inhabitants, once bridged the gap between India and Africa, providing a highway for these early animals. For a while, this was a respected, albeit speculative, scientific hypothesis. This rational explanation, however, was soon overtaken by a far more mystical vision. The transformation began with the rise of Theosophy, a spiritual movement co-founded by the enigmatic Helena Blavatsky in the late 19th century. In her seminal work, The Secret Doctrine, published in 1888, Blavatsky wove Lemuria into an elaborate cosmology of human origins. She described it not as a simple land bridge, but as a vast continent in the Indian and Pacific Oceans, home to the third root race of humanity. Her Lemurians were not simple primates but a bizarre, advanced, and spiritually attuned race. Blavatsky depicted them as egg-laying giants with a third eye in the back of their heads, possessing psychic powers and communicating through telepathy. In her narrative, this ancient civilization met a cataclysmic end through volcanic eruptions and earthquakes, though its legacy was carried on by the survivors who seeded the next great race in Atlantis. This theosophical reinterpretation severed Lemuria completely from its scientific roots, launching it into the world of occultism and esoteric belief. It became a blank canvas for imagining a lost golden age of spiritual purity and ancient wisdom. This version of Lemuria proved incredibly fertile ground for 20th century New Age thought, where it is often portrayed as a pacifist, matriarchal utopia that lived in harmony with nature before its destruction, a stark contrast to the warlike, technologically advanced Atlanteans. The legend was further popularized through channels like the psychic readings of Edgar Cayce, who spoke of Limuria much as he did of Atlantis, as a source of ancient knowledge waiting to be rediscovered by spiritually awakened individuals. The cultural footprint of this mythological continent is surprisingly vast. It appears in modern music, literature, and even video games, often serving as a synonym for a forgotten, ancient world. The band The Smashing Pumpkins referenced it on their album Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness, and it features in numerous fantasy novels and role-playing games. This enduring appeal exists in direct opposition to the modern scientific view. With the widespread acceptance of the theory of plate tectonics in the mid-20th century, the original geological need for Lemuria vanished. We now understand that India and Madagascar were once part of the same supercontinent, Gondwana, and their subsequent drift apart explains the distribution of species far more elegantly than a sunken landmass. For science, Lemuria is a historical curiosity, a discarded hypothesis from a time before we fully understood our planet's dynamic surface. This stark contrast between its scientific dismissal and its vibrant mythological life forces us to ask a compelling question. Why does the human mind so often reach for narratives of lost worlds to explain the unknown? Before we had the language of tectonic plates, a sunken continent was a perfectly logical, almost poetic, solution to a biological mystery. It fills the gaps in our knowledge with story, transforming a blank space on the map into a stage for epic drama. These narratives satisfy a deep need for meaning, offering grand explanations for natural phenomena and connecting us to a past that feels more significant and mysterious than the slow, impersonal grind of geological forces. Lemuria shows us that when fact cannot provide an immediate answer, myth eagerly rushes in, building entire worlds out of the shadows of our curiosity, and in doing so, it prepares us to explore those vanished cities that were always meant to be found on solid ground. While Atlantis and Lemuria were born from ancient philosophy and discarded science, our next legendary place emerged from the pages of a 20th century bestseller, yet it managed to tap into a yearning so deep it felt ancient. The name Shangri-La conjures an immediate image, a hidden valley nestled high in the snow-capped Himalayas, a sanctuary of breathtaking beauty where time moves slowly, people live for centuries, and the worries of the outside world simply cannot penetrate. This specific vision comes to us directly from British author James Hilton's 1933 novel, Lost Horizon. In it, a British diplomat named Hugh Conway and his companions are kidnapped after a plane crash and taken to the mysterious valley of Shangri-La, governed by a lamasery filled with ancient wisdom and art preserved from the ravages of time. The High Lamas there pursue a gentle mission, to act as a guardian of culture, waiting for the day when the outside world, consumed by war and strife, will finally be ready to rediscover peace and beauty. Hilton's genius was in his timing. He published his novel in the midst of the Great Depression, as the clouds of a Second World War were gathering over Europe. The idea of a secluded paradise, safe from economic collapse and impending conflict, was powerfully seductive to a Western audience exhausted by turmoil. It offered a form of mental escapism that was both spiritual and geographical. But Hilton did not create this idea from nothing. He was a brilliant synthesizer, weaving together threads from much older Eastern traditions. The most significant influence was the ancient Buddhist concept of Shambhala, a hidden kingdom mentioned in Kalachakra Tantra scriptures. Unlike the permanent peace of Shangri-La, Shambhala is prophesied to remain hidden until a future time of global war, when its king will emerge to lead a final battle against dark forces and inaugurate a new golden age. Hilton took this core idea of a hidden Himalayan sanctuary and softened its edges, transforming a mythical kingdom of spiritual warriors into a more passive, serene retreat tailored to a Western longing for quietude and preservation. This adaptation speaks volumes about the Western imagination of the East. For centuries, the Himalayas had been portrayed in European travelogues and religious texts as a remote, mystical region, the abode of sages and the source of esoteric knowledge. Shangri-La became the ultimate expression of this Orientalist fantasy, a place where the East exists solely to offer wisdom, peace, and refuge to a troubled West. It was not a place of dynamic, modern life, but a museum of the spirit frozen in a state of perfect harmony. This fantasy spurred very real searches. Explorers and mystics embarked on expeditions to find the physical location that inspired Hilton's tale. Some pointed to the Hunza Valley in Pakistan, renowned for the longevity of its inhabitants. Others believed it was the hidden valleys of Bhutan or the remote region of Kembalung in Nepal. In China, the government officially renamed a county in Yunnan province to Shangri-La in 2001, a shrewd move that acknowledged the legend's power to drive tourism and craft a regional identity. The enduring symbolic appeal of Shangri-La is that it represents an ideal that is almost antithetical to the frantic pace of modern life. It is not about conquest, wealth, or technological advancement, but about inner peace, cultural preservation, and harmony with nature. As the historian and Tibetologist Donald Lopez noted, places like Shambhala and, by extension, Shangri-La function as mythic reservoirs, holding the values that a society feels it has lost. They are mirrors reflecting our own anxieties about time, conflict, and decay. In a world that often feels increasingly fragmented and hurried, the idea of a valley where wisdom is preserved and life is lived with intention and grace remains an incredibly potent dream. It shows us that the most powerful mythological cities are not always those of glittering gold, but sometimes those of quiet contemplation, offering a vision of what we fear we are losing forever. If Atlantis represents the philosophical fear of collapse and Shangri-La the spiritual yearning for peace, then El Dorado stands as the ultimate symbol of a far more visceral human drive, insatiable greed. The legend of a city paved with gold, its rulers adorned in precious metals, did not spring from a philosopher's mind or a novelist's pen, but from a profound and tragic cultural misunderstanding, one that would cost countless lives and reshape the map of a continent. The true origin of El Dorado is not a place but a person. Among the Muisca people, a sophisticated civilization in the highlands of what is now Colombia, a powerful ritual took place upon the coronation of a new ruler. The Zipa, as he was known, would journey to the sacred lake Guatavita. His body would be covered entirely in adhesive gold dust, transforming him into a dazzling, shimmering figure, a living god. He would then board a raft piled high with gold and emeralds, and as he reached the center of the lake, he would wash the gold dust from his body and cast the immense treasures into the deep, dark waters as an offering to the gods. This was El Hombre Dorado, the Golden Man. To the Muisca, this was a sacred act of balance, a transaction with the divine to ensure prosperity and stability for their people. But when fragments of this story reached the ears of Spanish conquistadors, already drunk on the plundered gold of the Aztec and Inca empires, they heard only one thing: gold. They filtered the complex spiritual ceremony through a lens of avarice and materialism, twisting a single man into an entire city, and a ritual offering into an unimaginable hoard of wealth just waiting to be taken. The man became a king, the king ruled a city, and that city, El Dorado, became the most powerful and destructive geographical fantasy in history. This distorted dream fueled a century of nightmarish expeditions. Men led thousands of soldiers and native slaves into the uncharted and unforgiving heart of the Amazon rainforest, driven by a promise that was always just over the next mountain or down the next river. Perhaps the most infamous of these quests was led by Gonzalo Pizarro, brother of the conqueror of Peru. In 1541, lured by rumors of a land richer than the Inca Empire, Pizarro assembled a massive force, over 200 Spanish soldiers, thousands of indigenous porters, and herds of livestock to sustain them. They plunged into the jungle expecting to find their prize within weeks. Instead, they found a green hell. Supplies ran out, men starved, and disease ran rampant. The native porters, forced into servitude, died by the hundreds. In a desperate move, Pizarro sent his lieutenant, Francisco de Orellana, ahead on a raft to search for food. Orellana, swept by the current down the mighty Napo River, found himself carried on a journey that would eventually take him the entire length of the Amazon River to the Atlantic Ocean, a monumental feat of exploration born from a failed and bloody search for a myth. Pizarro, meanwhile, was forced to lead his shattered, starving remnants back to Quito, having found nothing but suffering and death. This pattern repeated itself again and again. The German conquistador Philip von Hutten spent years wandering the Venezuelan plains. The English courtier Sir Walter Raleigh mounted 2 expensive expeditions to Guyana, staking his own reputation and ultimately his life on the existence of the Golden City, which he called Manoa. Each failure only seemed to enrich the legend, moving El Dorado farther inland, making it more elusive and therefore, in the minds of the obsessed, more real. As historian and author Charles C. Mann notes, these quests were not just searches for wealth, they were engines of colonization. The relentless push to find El Dorado drove Europeans to map rivers, cross mountains, and establish outposts in territories they otherwise might have avoided, forever altering the demographics and ecosystems of the Americas. The myth served as a perfect justification for expansion and exploitation, providing a noble-sounding goal that masked a brutal reality of enslavement, displacement, and violence against indigenous populations. The tragic irony, of course, is that El Dorado did exist, just not in the way the conquistadors imagined. The Muisca civilization was indeed rich in gold, and they were master goldsmiths. Their exquisite works, including the famous Muisca raft that depicts the very ceremony itself, show a deep cultural and artistic relationship with the metal. For them, gold was not currency. It was a sacred material, a connection to the sun god, and a medium for incredible art. The Spanish, in their single-minded pursuit of molten wealth, melted down almost every artifact they found, obliterating a vast cultural heritage to feed the royal mints of Spain. The real city of gold was not a physical location to be looted, but a cultural understanding to be appreciated, a distinction that was utterly lost on the invaders. This forces us to confront a difficult question about the nature of obsession. What is the true cost of a myth? In the case of El Dorado, the price was paid in human lives, lost cultures, and immeasurable suffering. It reveals a darker side to our fascination with lost cities, the capacity for a beautiful story to be corrupted into a destructive force, a siren song that leads not to enlightenment but to ruin. The legend of El Dorado is perhaps the most powerful cautionary tale of all, reminding us that the most valuable treasures are rarely the ones we can hold in our hands, and that the greatest mysteries often lie not in the landscape but in the human heart. If the feverish quest for El Dorado represented a desperate plunge into the South American jungle, the myth of the 7 cities of Cibola sparked an equally ambitious and ill-fated march into the arid, unknown heart of North America. This legend, born from a potent cocktail of hope, hearsay, and profound cultural misunderstanding, would send waves of Spanish explorers north from Mexico, forever altering the landscape of the continent and its indigenous peoples. The story began with a shipwreck and a tall tale. In 1528, a vessel carrying Alvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca and his crew foundered off the coast of Texas. The survivors spent 8 years wandering across the American Southwest, living among various Native American tribes before finally stumbling upon a Spanish slave hunting party in northern Mexico in 1536. Upon his return, Cabeza de Vaca recounted his incredible journey, but it was his companion, an enslaved Moor named Estebanico, who would provide the crucial and ultimately fatal spark. Estebanico, who had learned the languages and customs of the tribes they encountered, later guided a small reconnaissance mission led by a friar named Marcos de Niza. As they traveled, Estebanico would range ahead, sending back messengers with large crosses. The larger the cross, the greater the wealth he claimed to be hearing about. He reported stories from local peoples of 7 magnificent cities to the north, so rich that their doors were adorned with turquoise and their streets flowed with gold. Then, tragically, Estebanico entered the Zuni pueblo of Huaca alone. The Zuni, likely wary of this strange man accompanied by rumors and a foreign agenda, saw him as a threat and killed him. When Fray Marcos heard the news, he did not enter the pueblo himself. Instead, he viewed it from a distant hillside, with the sun setting and reflecting off the multi-storied adobe buildings. The pueblo might have indeed looked like a city of gold to a man who desperately wanted to see one. He returned to Mexico City with a report that confirmed the wildest dreams of the Spanish viceroy, Antonio de Mendoza. The 7 cities were real and they were called Cibola. This report triggered one of the most grandiose and poorly conceived expeditions in North American history. In 1540, Francisco Vázquez de Coronado was chosen to lead a massive force of over 300 Spanish soldiers, more than 1,000 indigenous allies, and enormous herds of livestock north in search of the fabled cities. They were a traveling army equipped for conquest and weighed down by expectations of unimaginable plunder. After months of grueling travel, they finally reached Huaca. What they found was not a metropolis of gold, but a small, fortified pueblo of sun-dried mud brick. The reality was a devastating shock. As one of Coronado's men, Pedro de Castaneda, later wrote, "Such were the curses that some hurled at Fray Marcos that I pray God may protect him from them." The disillusionment was so complete that it turned immediately to violence. Despite being exhausted and outnumbered, the Zuni warriors defended their home from the Spanish assault. Coronado himself was nearly killed in the fighting, knocked unconscious by a hail of stones before his soldiers eventually overran the pueblo. The grand expedition did not end at Huaca. For 2 more years, Coronado's force wandered across the vast expanse of what is now the southwestern United States, from the Grand Canyon to the plains of Kansas, chasing ever more elusive whispers of wealth. They heard a new story from a captured Pawnee man they called El Turco, who spoke of a fabulously rich land called Quivira. This led them on a desperate trek across the featureless grasslands, only to find a simple village of thatched huts, a place so poor that the only thing of value to the Spaniards was the copper pendant worn by the chief. The final, bitter irony came with the realization that El Turco had likely been leading them in circles, hoping they would get lost or starve. Coronado, in a fit of rage, had him executed. The entire venture was a catastrophic failure, costing a fortune and countless lives, both Spanish and native, for absolutely no material gain. This pattern reveals a fascinating and tragic mechanism of colonial exploration. A mundane reality, in this case, the impressive but entirely earthen architecture of the Zuni and other Puebloan peoples, was transformed through a filter of overwhelming desire into a legend of impossible wealth. The Zuni pueblos were, and are, architectural marvels, complex multi-story structures that housed thriving communities. Their artisans created beautiful pottery and intricate turquoise jewelry, which they traded across vast distances. But they had no gold. The Spanish, however, were so conditioned by their experiences in Mesoamerica and South America, where gold was abundant in elite circles, that they could not conceive of a complex civilization without it. Their perception was entirely shaped by their avarice, leading them to see cities of gold where there were only well-built towns of clay. This cultural clash was not merely one of arms but of worldviews. The Spanish sought to extract wealth, while the Pueblo peoples were focused on agriculture, community, and survival in a harsh environment. The legend of Cibola was a phantom born from this fundamental disconnect, a mirage that shimmered with promise until the moment of brutal, disappointing contact. After the sun-scorched deserts of Cibola and the humid jungles of El Dorado, we now turn to a legend born of mist and water, a place not of earthly treasure but of spiritual solace. In the rich tapestry of Arthurian legend, no place embodies the themes of mystery, healing, and transcendence more than the ethereal Isle of Avalon. This was the mystical sanctuary to which the mortally wounded King Arthur was born after the tragic final battle of Camlan. According to the tales, it was here, in this otherworldly realm, that his legendary sword Excalibur was forged, and here that he was taken to be healed of his grievous wounds, waiting for the time when Britain would have need of him once more. Unlike cities of gold that promise material wealth, Avalon offers something far more profound, the promise of renewal and the hope of return. The origins of Avalon are deeply rooted in the ancient Celtic otherworld, a concept central to the pre-Christian beliefs of the British Isles. The Celts believed in a parallel dimension, a realm of eternal youth and abundance that existed just beyond the veil of our own world, often accessible through certain liminal spaces like lakes, caves, or islands. This otherworld was not a place for the dead, but a land of the ever-living, the gods, and the powerful forces of nature. The very name Avalon is thought to derive from the Welsh word afal, meaning apple, a fruit of immense symbolic importance in Celtic mythology. Apples represented immortality, healing, and wisdom, and the island was often described as a place of orchards bearing these magical fruits. This connects Avalon directly to other Celtic mythical realms like Tyr, Na, and Og, the land of youth, emphasizing its role as a place beyond the decay and sorrow of the mortal world. The literary journey of Avalon begins in earnest with the 12th century chronicler Geoffrey of Monmouth. In his seminal work, Historia Regum Britanniae, the history of the kings of Britain, he provides some of the earliest and most influential accounts of the Arthurian myths. It is Geoffrey who first mentions Insula Avalonis as the place where Arthur's sword, Caliburnus, the Latin precursor to Excalibur, was forged, and to where the king is taken after Camlan. Geoffrey's work, a blend of historical record, folklore, and outright invention, was a medieval bestseller that captured the imagination of Europe and established the core elements of the Arthurian cycle that would be elaborated upon for centuries. Perhaps the most fascinating and enduring attempt to ground this myth in reality is its association with Glastonbury in Somerset, England. In the late 12th century, monks at Glastonbury Abbey made a stunning announcement. They had discovered the tombs of King Arthur and Queen Guinevere. This was likely a strategic move, both to raise funds after a devastating fire and to quell Welsh nationalism by proving their legendary hero was truly dead. They even claimed that a nearby hill, Glastonbury Tor, which often rises dramatically from the surrounding floodwaters like an island, was the actual Avalon. The local landscape supported this connection. The area was known for its apple orchards, and the watery plains around the Tor would have made it appear as an island in earlier times. This clever fusion of geography and myth gave a physical pilgrimage site to a spiritual idea, allowing the faithful to walk where legend said Arthur slept. Yet to reduce Avalon to a single location is to miss its greater power. Its true essence is symbolic. Avalon represents the ultimate sanctuary, a hidden haven where what is broken can be made whole and what is lost can be preserved. It is the archetypal place of healing, not just for the body but for the spirit of a nation. In times of turmoil, the idea that a once and future king rests in a timeless realm waiting to return offers a powerful narrative of hope and resilience. It transforms history into myth, giving a nation a story of destiny and redemption. This is why Avalon has continued to evolve in literature, from Sir Thomas Malory's Le Morte d'Arthur to modern novels and films, always adapting to speak to the contemporary longing for a place of peace and restoration beyond the conflicts of the present day. What is it about such realms that forever captures our imagination? Perhaps it is the deep, human need to believe that there is a retreat from inevitable loss, a secret harbor where our greatest heroes and ideals are kept safe, waiting for the moment when the world is ready to believe in magic once again. From the mythical orchards of Avalon, we travel now to the windswept coast of Brittany, where the crashing waves of the Atlantic are said to hide one of France's most poignant and haunting legends, the sunken city of Wise. The story begins with a king's impossible love for his daughter and a feat of engineering that defied the sea itself. King Gradlon, the ruler of Cornwall, was said to have built a magnificent city on the fertile coastal plains, but so low was the land that it lay below the high tide mark. To protect his beloved city and his even more beloved daughter, Princess Dahat, he commissioned a massive dike with a single, enormous bronze gate. The king alone held the only key to this gate, a key he wore around his neck, for it was opened each day to allow ships to pass and then sealed shut to keep the vengeful ocean at bay. Within this man-made fortress, Wise prospered. It was a city of unparalleled beauty and wealth, but also of increasing decadence. The people, led by the free-spirited and reckless Princess Dahat, began to turn away from the pious ways of the king, indulging in endless parties and moral abandon. The city's very protection bred a dangerous arrogance, a belief that they were untouchable, masters of the very sea that threatened them. The legend takes its tragic turn with the arrival of a mysterious, handsome stranger, often depicted in tellings as a knight clad in red. He captivates the rebellious Princess Dahat, who is eager to defy her father's stern warnings. During a lavish festival, the stranger whispers to her that the greatest thrill would be to open the city gates at night, to hear the powerful roar of the ocean. Seduced by the idea, and perhaps by the stranger himself, Dahat devises a plan. She waits until her father has fallen into a deep, enchanted sleep, steals the key from around his neck, and unlocks the massive bronze gate. Some versions say the stranger was a demon, others that he was the devil himself, but the result is always the same. With a thunderous crash, the sea, no longer held back, erupts into the city. The revelry of the festival is instantly drowned out by the screams of the citizens as a colossal wave swallows Wise whole. King Gradlon awakens to the catastrophe. He seizes his daughter, mounts his trusty horse Morvark, and tries to flee the rushing waters. As they gallop ahead of the flood, a voice, some say it was Saint Winwallow, the king's own religious advisor, booms from the heavens, accusing Gradlon. "Throw the demon behind you," the voice commands. The king realizes his daughter's terrible sin and the part his own indulgence played in it. In a heart-wrenching moment of clarity, he pushes the weeping Dahat from the horse into the raging waters. Immediately, the sea begins to recede, and Gradlon escapes to found the city of Quimper, living out his days in penitent sorrow for the loss of his city and his child. The tale is a powerful blend of Celtic mythology and Christian morality, echoing other great flood narratives like the biblical story of Noah or the Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh. It serves as a stark warning against hubris, hedonism, and the failure of a leader to curb the recklessness of those in his care. It asks a timeless question: when a disaster strikes, be it natural or moral, where does the ultimate responsibility lie? Is it with the individual who commits the foolish act, or with the society that created the conditions for it to happen? The cultural footprint of Wise is immense within French, and particularly Breton, folklore. It has been the subject of countless poems, most famously Charles-Marie Leconte de Lisle's La Ville d'Is, and classical music compositions such as Édouard Lolo's opera Le Roi d'Is. The legend is a cornerstone of Breton identity, a story that ties the people to their rugged maritime landscape and serves as an explanation for the relentless power of the sea that both sustains and threatens them. Even today, local fishermen will sometimes point to certain days when the tide pulls back especially far, claiming you can still hear the bells of the submerged cathedrals of Wise ringing mournfully from beneath the waves. This enduring presence in song and story has kept the myth alive for centuries, transforming it from a simple folktale into a national symbol of lost glory and poetic tragedy. But could there be a kernel of historical truth buried beneath the layers of myth? Geologists and historians have long speculated that the legend of Wise might be a cultural memory of a very real catastrophic event. The coast of Brittany, like many parts of the world, has been subject to rising sea levels since the end of the last ice age. It is entirely plausible that a prehistoric settlement, or even a small Roman-era trading port, was gradually or suddenly engulfed by the sea. Some theories suggest the city could have been located in the Bay of Douarnenez, where the geography fits the description of a sheltered, low-lying area. Others point to the phenomenon of tsunami-like events or a sudden, massive storm surge, a not uncommon occurrence on the Atlantic coast that could have overwhelmed coastal defenses and wiped a vulnerable community off the map. The story of the single gate failure could be a dramatic simplification of a more complex coastal engineering system that was breached. While no definitive archaeological evidence of a grand city has been found, the legend of Wise persists as a beautiful and tragic explanation for the undeniable power of the ocean and the fragile existence of those who live at its edge, a perfect prelude to the many other cities whose fate was sealed by the uncontrollable forces of nature. Further north along Europe's stormy coastline, another legendary port city is said to sleep beneath the waves, a place of such immense wealth and maritime power that its memory became a cornerstone of regional identity. This is the story of Vineta, often called the Atlantis of the North, a mythical trading metropolis that once dominated the Baltic Sea, only to be swallowed by the sea as punishment for its sins. The legend appears in both Slavic and German chronicles from the Middle Ages, with sources like the 12th century chronicler Adam of Bremen describing it as the largest of all cities in Europe, a bustling hub where Slavic, Scandinavian, and Germanic merchants gathered to trade in amber, furs, salt, and precious metals. It was portrayed as a city of stunning opulence, where the streets were so crowded with foreign traders that a dozen languages could be heard in its markets, and its citizens lived in such luxury that they used silver tools and golden plows. Yet this prosperity was paired with a narrative of moral decay. The tales speak of growing arrogance, greed, and decadence among the people of Vineta, who began to mock the gods and ignore the poor. As the story goes, this hubris invited divine retribution. One night, a terrifying storm rose from the Baltic, with waves like mountains and winds that tore the very roofs from the houses. The sea surged into the city, swallowing its magnificent buildings, its bustling harbors, and its sinful inhabitants in a single, catastrophic event, leaving nothing behind but a few scattered timbers and a lasting legend of a paradise lost beneath the waves. But how much of this compelling narrative is rooted in historical reality? Archaeologists and historians have long debated the possible basis for the Vineta myth, and many believe it is a romanticized amalgamation of several very real and powerful trading centers that flourished along the southern Baltic coast between the 9th and 12th centuries. The leading candidate for the historical Vineta is the modern-day Polish town of Wollin, situated on an island at the mouth of the Oder River. Excavations at Wollin have revealed evidence of a massive Viking Age emporium, a cosmopolitan trading port that was indeed one of the largest in early medieval Europe. The archaeological record shows a dense, multi-ethnic settlement with workshops, longhouses, and a complex system of fortifications. Dr. Ole Hark, a leading archaeologist who has worked extensively in the region, notes, "What we find at sites like Wallen is not a city of gold, but something perhaps more valuable, evidence of immense cultural exchange." The material culture is a mix of Slavic, Scandinavian, and Frankish artifacts, exactly what the legends describe. The myth of Vineta likely grew from the memory of these incredibly prosperous and influential trading hubs that suddenly declined. Other potential candidates include the ancient port of Jomsborg, a legendary Viking fortress, or the sunken settlements around the island of Usedom, where shifting shorelines have indeed claimed land over the centuries. The enduring search for a physical Vineta speaks to its powerful role in the cultural memory of the Baltic region. For Germans, it became a symbol of a lost Hanseatic golden age, while for Slavic peoples, it represented a proud, independent mercantile power before the encroachment of German colonization. This dual ownership of the myth is a testament to its power. It belongs to no single nation but to the shared history of the entire Baltic Sea. The legend has been a fertile source for artists and writers for centuries. The 19th century German poet Wilhelm Müller, famous for his lyrics in Schubert's Winterreise, wrote a poem dedicated to the sunken city, and it features prominently in the works of Polish Nobel laureate Henryk Sienkiewicz. These artistic interpretations often lean into the moral lesson, portraying Vineta as a timeless cautionary tale about the dangers of wealth without wisdom and power without piety. The city's bells, said to still ring from beneath the water on calm Sunday mornings, serve as a persistent auditory ghost, a reminder of the vibrant community that once was and a call to remember the lessons of the past. The persistence of sunken city myths like Vineta and Wise is no coincidence. They emerge directly from humanity's long and precarious relationship with coastlines. For thousands of years, people have been drawn to settle along shores for access to food, transportation, and trade. Yet these are among the most geologically dynamic and vulnerable environments on Earth. Coastal erosion, sea level rise, storm surges, and tectonic subsidence have always posed existential threats to maritime communities. The legend of a city swallowed by the sea is often a poetic, simplified explanation for a complex and terrifying natural process. A slow, generational retreat from an advancing shoreline could easily be condensed in oral tradition into a single, catastrophic event. A major storm that wiped out a vulnerable coastal village becomes a story of divine punishment, providing a moral framework for a random natural disaster. These myths are more than just stories. They are ancient risk assessments and cultural memories of very real environmental trauma, echoing the anxieties of every generation that builds its life at the water's edge, a theme that becomes even more potent as we turn our gaze to the deserts, where an entire city was said to have been erased not by water but by sand. While the coasts of Europe gave rise to legends of cities claimed by the sea, the vast, unforgiving deserts of the Arabian Peninsula spawned a myth of a different kind of burial, one not by water but by sand. Here, the scorching winds whisper of Aram of the Pillars, a city of such staggering wealth and arrogance that it was erased from the earth by a divine cataclysm, swallowed whole by the very desert it sought to conquer. The most famous account of Aram comes from the Quran, in a chapter named after the city itself, Surah al-Fajr. It tells of the people of Ad, a powerful and ancient tribe to whom the prophet Hud was sent. They were a civilization of immense stature and technological mastery, building magnificent, towering structures supported by immense pillars, a sight meant to showcase their dominance over the harsh environment. But with this power came a profound hubris. They turned away from Hud's message to worship the one God, instead growing increasingly wicked, corrupt, and oppressive. For 3 years, as the Quran recounts, God withheld the rains from them, but they remained stubborn in their disbelief. Their punishment was not a mere drought, but a supernatural storm. A devastating, roaring wind was sent against them for 7 nights and 8 days, a sandstorm of apocalyptic proportions that scoured the city and its inhabitants from the face of the earth, leaving no trace behind but a lesson for future generations. This narrative is not confined to scripture. It is deeply woven into the fabric of Bedouin folklore and pre-Islamic Arabian poetry. For centuries, storytellers around desert campfires spoke of Aram as a place of legend, a ghost city that served as the ultimate cautionary tale against pride and disobedience. The famed poet-scholar Al-Asma'i, who collected these ancient desert tales, described Aram as a city with castles of gold and silver, its streets filled with treasures beyond imagination, a place so magnificent that other kings would send gifts merely to gaze upon its splendor. In these stories, its king, Shaddad ibn Ad, defiantly sought to build a paradise on earth to rival the paradise of heaven promised by God. Upon its completion, he and his entire court marched toward their earthly paradise, only to be met by a divine command and the terrifying sound of the impending storm before they could even set foot inside. This rich tapestry of religious and folkloric sources cemented Aram's place in the Arab imagination not merely as a historical location, but as a powerful moral and spiritual symbol, a stark reminder that no human achievement, no matter how grand, can withstand the judgment of the divine. For much of history, Aram was considered a purely mythological place, a story devised to impart a religious lesson. That perception began to shift in the early 20th century, fueled by a combination of ancient texts and modern technology. The quest was ignited by the accounts of British explorer Bertram Thomas, who in 1930, while crossing the desolate Rub al-Khali, or empty quarter, was told by his Bedouin guides of a road known as the Way of Yubar, which led to a lost city of their ancestors. This name, Yubar, resonated with scholars. They noted its similarity to a place mentioned by the Greek-Egyptian geographer Ptolemy in the 2nd century CE, which he labeled Amanum Emporium, a trading hub for frankincense. The most dramatic breakthrough came decades later in the 1980s when a team led by British explorer Ranulph Fiennes, filmmaker Nicholas Clapp, and archaeologist Joris Zarens employed a new tool, satellite imagery. By analyzing photographs from NASA's Space Shuttle Challenger and Landsat satellites, they identified ancient desert tracks, invisible from the ground, that converged like spokes on a wheel at a single point in modern-day Oman. Following these ghost roads, the expedition arrived at the site of Shisar, where they began to excavate. What they found was not a city of golden pillars, but the ruins of a significant fortified outpost, a limestone citadel with 8 towers, sitting atop a massive limestone cavern. The ground had collapsed, swallowing much of the structure into the sinkhole below. They had found a city that had literally been swallowed by the earth. The team announced to the world that they had discovered the historical Yubar, which they confidently linked to the legendary Aram of the Pillars. The evidence was compelling. The site was a major caravan stop on the frankincense trade route. It showed signs of great wealth, and its catastrophic end via sinkhole collapse could easily have been remembered and mythologized over centuries into a story of divine punishment by sandstorm. However, this bold claim was met with significant scholarly debate. Many archaeologists and historians, including Dr. Michael MacDonald, a renowned expert on ancient Arabia, urged caution. They argued that while Shisar was undoubtedly an important discovery, confidently equating it with the Aram of the Quran was a leap. The site was a fortress and watering hole, not the immense, sprawling metropolis described in legend. The name Yuba itself was likely a regional name for a group of settlements or a tribe, not a single city. The discovery proved there was a historical kernel, a wealthy trading center that met a sudden, dramatic end. But the full, glorious legend of Iram remains for many in the realm of powerful story. This interplay between faith, folklore, and archaeology is what makes Iram so fascinating. It forces us to ask, does a legend need a specific physical address to be true? Or does its real power and truth lie in the enduring moral and cultural lessons it imparts, lessons that have guided people across the desert for millennia? Whether by divine sandstorm or sinking coastline, the fate of Iram and Vineta points to a powerful, universal truth. Some of our most enduring myths of vanished cities are born from humanity's raw, traumatic encounters with the uncontrollable power of nature. Long before we possessed the scientific language of plate tectonics or climate cycles, our ancestors experienced earthquakes, floods, and volcanic eruptions as sudden, apocalyptic acts of God or nature. These catastrophic events did not just destroy cities, they shattered worldviews, leaving behind a psychological void that could only be filled with story. A community wiped out in a single night by a tsunami becomes a cautionary tale of divine retribution. A city buried under volcanic ash is transformed over centuries into a legend of a people who angered the gods. These narratives are not mere fictions, they are the foundational pillars of collective memory, our ancient attempts to make sense of the unimaginable and find meaning in chaos. Consider the poignant example of Hylike. In the winter of 373 B.C.E., the prosperous Greek city-state, a prominent member of the Achaean League and a center of worship for the god Poseidon, was struck by a catastrophic earthquake. The ground liquefied and the city sank into the earth. Then, a massive tsunami from the Corinthian Gulf swept over the ruins, wiping Hylike from the map entirely and drowning its inhabitants. The historian Diodorus Siculus recorded that the city's obliteration was so complete that even its location was eventually forgotten. For centuries, Hylike became a legend, a story told to warn of the wrath of Poseidon. It wasn't until the 1980s that archaeologists, following clues from ancient texts, began to systematically search for the lost city. Their discovery of ruins buried under coastal deposits was a stunning confirmation of the historical truth behind the myth. The story of Hylike's destruction was so dramatic that it likely influenced Plato, who wrote his account of Atlantis just a few decades later. This direct link shows how a real, traumatic natural disaster can ripple through time, evolving into a grander, more philosophical myth about the fate of civilizations. Even cities whose histories are well documented are not immune to this process of mythologization. Pompeii is the most famous example. We know with precise historical and archaeological certainty what happened on August 24, 79 C. When Mount Vesuvius erupted, we have the heartbreaking plaster casts of the victims, the preserved loaves of bread in ovens, the detailed maps of its streets. And yet, Pompeii has been heavily romanticized in popular culture. It is often portrayed not just as a tragic archaeological site, but as a city frozen in a single moment of decadent pleasure, a moralistic tableau of lives cut short in the midst of hedonism. This narrative, while rooted in the evidence of lavish villas and vibrant frescoes, simplifies a complex, working Roman town into a symbol of sudden divine punishment, echoing the same themes found in the legends of Iram or Wise. The scientific reality of pyroclastic flows is overshadowed by the powerful, enduring story of a civilization preserved in its final, intimate moments. The psychological impact of these events is profound and long-lasting. Dr. Amos Nur, a geophysicist at Stanford University who has studied the impact of earthquakes on ancient societies, suggests that a major seismic event can resonate culturally for millennia. A single catastrophe can destroy not just buildings, but the very confidence of a civilization, he notes. When the ground itself, the most solid thing we know, betrays you, it creates a deep-seated existential anxiety. That anxiety seeks explanation and often finds it in stories of moral failure and divine wrath. This process embeds the disaster into the collective memory of a culture, transforming it from a historical event into an archetypal story. It becomes a narrative tool used to teach lessons about humility, piety, and the precariousness of human achievement. We see this in flood myths that appear in countless cultures, from the story of Noah to the epic of Gilgamesh to the myth of Wise. These are not coincidences. They are likely cultural memories of real, catastrophic flooding events at the end of the last ice age, retold and refined over thousands of years into sacred stories. This brings us to a deeply human question about our own vulnerability. In the face of a tsunami, an earthquake, or a volcano, we are confronted with our utter insignificance against the forces of our planet. How do we, as a species, cope with that terrifying realization? We tell stories. We weave narratives that give the disaster a reason, a purpose, a moral. It is far less frightening to believe a city was sunk because its people were sinful than to accept that a tectonic shift, a random and impersonal event, could erase generations of human endeavor in an instant. These myths are a defense mechanism, a way to reclaim a sense of order from chaos and assert that the universe, in the end, operates on a principle of justice, however severe. They are the ancient equivalent of a trauma response, allowing societies to process loss and warn future generations of very real dangers, all while cloaking the terrifying randomness of nature in the more comfortable garments of legend and meaning. But what happens when the cause of a city's disappearance is not an act of God, but the hand of man? The stories we tell then take on a different, often even darker character. While the relentless forces of nature have erased countless cities from the map, leaving behind legends of divine judgment, the hand of humanity itself has been just as effective, and often far more brutal, in consigning mighty civilizations to the realm of myth. The stories of cities lost to war and conquest are not tales of passive destruction by earthquake or flood, but narratives of active, deliberate erasure, where the victors often seek to scrub their rivals not just from the land, but from memory itself. This process of violent deletion, however, rarely succeeds completely. Instead, the memory of these places undergoes a fascinating transformation, fermenting in the collective consciousness over centuries to emerge as potent myths of cursed grounds, lost glory, and moral lessons about the inevitable cycles of rise and fall. Consider the fate of Carthage, a name that still echoes with a mixture of awe and tragedy. This North African powerhouse, founded by Phoenician colonists, grew to become the dominant maritime empire in the Western Mediterranean, a sprawling metropolis of immense wealth and sophistication that directly challenged the rising power of Rome. The rivalry between these two civilizations culminated in the three devastating Punic Wars, a struggle for supremacy that stretched over a century. The final chapter, the Third Punic War, was less a war and more a predetermined annihilation. In 146 B.C.E., after a grueling 3-year siege, Roman legions under Scipio Aemilianus finally breached the city's defenses. What followed was not merely a sacking, but a systematic, ritualized obliteration. The Romans burned Carthage to the ground, tore down its walls, and are said to have sowed the fields with salt so that nothing could ever grow there again, a powerful symbolic act meant to curse the land for eternity. The surviving population was sold into slavery, and the once great empire was dissolved into a Roman province. This act of total war was so absolute, so final, that it ensured Carthage would live on not as a living city, but as a ghost. Its physical absence created a vacuum that was quickly filled by myth and moralizing. Roman historians like Plutarch and Appian, writing long after the events, embellished the narrative with tales of child sacrifice to the god Baal-Hamon, painting the Carthaginians as a uniquely cruel and decadent people whose destruction was not just politically necessary but morally justified. This post-conflict myth-making, as historian Dr. Richard Miles explains in his work Carthage Must Be Destroyed, served a crucial purpose for Rome. It transformed a brutal act of imperialist aggression into a righteous crusade against a monstrous enemy. The myth of the Punic curse persisted for generations, a warning about the dangers of hubris and the ruthlessness of a competitor who will stop at nothing to win. The city's physical ruins lay forgotten for centuries, its true story buried under layers of Roman propaganda, only to be slowly unearthed by archaeologists millennia later, revealing a complex civilization that was far more than the monstrous caricature its destroyers had created. A similar, though even more rapid, process of destruction and myth-making unfolded across the Atlantic with the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan. When Hernán Cortés and his conquistadors first gazed upon the city in 1519, they beheld a sight that seemed almost impossible to European eyes. Built on an island in the middle of Lake Texcoco, it was larger than any city in Spain, connected by causeways, graced with immense pyramids that soared toward the sun, and laced with canals bustling with canoes. It was a breathtaking marvel of engineering and central planning, the beating heart of a powerful and sophisticated empire. Yet within just 2 years, this awe-inspiring city was reduced to rubble. Through a combination of superior weaponry, devastating European diseases like smallpox to which the Native Americans had no immunity, and crucial alliances with rival indigenous states who chafed under Aztec rule, Cortés engineered the city's downfall. The siege was merciless and the final destruction was comprehensive. The Spaniards, driven by a zeal to eradicate the indigenous religion and culture, methodically tore down the towering Templo Mayor and used its stones to build their own colonial capital, Mexico City, right on top of the old city's foundations. The conquest of Tenochtitlan is a prime example of how a city's destruction is only the first step in its journey into myth. The Spanish chroniclers who documented the event, while often acknowledging the city's splendor, simultaneously framed its fall as a divinely ordained triumph of Christianity over pagan, devil worship. The Aztec Empire, with its practice of human sacrifice, was portrayed as a kingdom of darkness that deserved its fate. This narrative served to legitimize the conquest and the subsequent colonial project. But in the shadows, a counter-narrative grew among the conquered peoples. Legends persisted of the lost glory of Tenochtitlan, a kind of Aztec Atlantis, a place of incredible beauty and power that was betrayed and stolen. The ruins buried beneath the new city became a symbol of a stolen heritage, a deep cultural wound that would fuel centuries of artistic, literary, and political movements seeking to reclaim a pre-colonial identity. The lost city was no longer just a place. It became a powerful symbol of resistance and a poignant reminder of what was lost in the clash of worlds. These stories of Carthage and Tenochtitlan reveal a universal pattern in the aftermath of conquest. The complete physical destruction of a rival's central place of power is a profound psychological act. It severs a people from their geographic and cultural heart, demoralizes them, and attempts to erase any evidence of their former greatness. But as time passes, the very totality of that erasure often backfires. The absence becomes a blank canvas. The victors paint it with stories that justify their actions, creating myths of the enemy's inherent evil or barbarism. The vanquished, meanwhile, nurture the memory into a myth of a lost golden age, a paradise stolen by a cruel and unjust foe. This process turns a historical event into an eternal archetype, a story that can be told and retold to serve the needs of the present. It forces us to confront a difficult truth about human history, that our myths of lost cities are often born from our most violent and traumatic interactions, and they serve as lasting monuments not to stone and mortar, but to the enduring power of memory, grievance, and the relentless human need to find meaning, even in our darkest hours. And sometimes the end of a city arrives not with the dramatic clash of armies, but with the silent, slow retreat of trade, the exhaustion of resources, or the quiet shifting of cultural tides. Not all cities meet their end in a sudden cataclysm of fire, water, or steel. Some of history's most magnificent places faded away not with a bang, but with a whisper, a slow, inexorable decline driven by the shifting currents of commerce, the silent exhaustion of the land, or the gradual absorption of one culture into another. These vanishings, though less dramatic, are no less profound, and they often leave behind a different kind of mystery, one that asks not what sudden wrath erased a civilization, but what subtle changes caused a thriving society to simply walk away. When a city is abandoned over generations, its empty streets and silent temples become a blank slate, inviting later observers to project their own fantasies of hidden treasure and esoteric knowledge onto the ruins, transforming economic history into enchanting legend. Consider the breathtaking city of Petra, carved directly into the rose-red cliffs of southern Jordan. For centuries, this was the glittering capital of the Nabatean Empire, a people who mastered the harsh desert environment. Their genius lay in hydrology. They constructed an intricate network of canals, dams, and cisterns that captured scarce rainwater, allowing them to cultivate the land and support a large population. But their true wealth came from their geographical fortune. Petra sat at the crucial nexus of several major trade routes, a crossroads for the caravans carrying frankincense, myrrh, silk, and spices between Arabia, Egypt, Syria, and the Mediterranean. The Nabateans grew immensely wealthy by controlling this flow of goods, taxing the merchants and providing protection. This prosperity is etched into the very rock, in the form of magnificent tombs like the treasury and the monastery, monuments to a thriving commercial empire. Then the world changed. By the 3rd and 4th centuries CE, the Romans had developed and mastered sea routes through the Red Sea. It became faster, cheaper, and safer to transport goods by ship than to undertake the arduous and expensive overland journey through the desert. Almost overnight, Petra's reason for existence began to evaporate. The great trade caravans bypassed the city, and its economic lifeblood slowed to a trickle. A major earthquake in 363 CE damaged many of its vital water management systems, a blow from which the declining city could not recover. Gradually, people left. The magnificent facades were abandoned to the wind and the sand, and knowledge of the city faded from the wider world, preserved only in local Bedouin folklore. For over 1,000 years, Petra was a ghost, its memory in the West kept alive only by vague, tantalizing references in ancient texts. When Swiss explorer Johann Ludwig Burckhardt famously rediscovered it in 1812, he did so by disguising himself and concocting a story about sacrificing a goat at the tomb of Aaron, just to catch a glimpse of the fabled ruins. The Western world was electrified. The sight of those majestic structures hidden in a remote canyon immediately spawned legends that the treasury, so named by Bedouin who believed an Egyptian pharaoh had hidden his treasure in the stone urn atop its facade, was filled with gold. The reality, of course, was that the city's true treasure had not been gold, but water and location. Its loss was a stark lesson in economic fragility, a reminder that a city's fortunes are often tied to forces far beyond its control. As anthropologist Dr. Susan Alcock notes, the abandonment of a place like Petra isn't a single event, but a process of unraveling. It shows how a community's identity is bound to its economic purpose, and when that purpose vanishes, the social fabric can quickly come apart. A similar story of quiet decline unfolded over 7,000 miles away at the Great Stone City of Great Zimbabwe in southeastern Africa. This was the heart of a powerful kingdom that dominated the region between the 11th and 15th centuries. The scale of its construction is staggering. Massive, dry stone walls built without mortar curve and climb across the landscape, forming an elaborate complex of enclosures and towers. The wealth of Great Zimbabwe was built on a thriving pastoral economy, and most importantly, its control over the gold trade. From mines in the interior, gold was transported to the coast at Sofala, where it was exchanged with Arab and Swahili merchants for glass, porcelain, and other luxury goods from across the Indian Ocean. The stone walls of the city were not just for defense. They were a bold statement of power, stability, and prestige, designed to impress trading partners and demonstrate the kingdom's sophistication and permanence. Yet, this permanence proved fleeting. The most widely accepted theory for its abandonment points to environmental and economic pressures. Centuries of cattle grazing and agriculture may have led to soil exhaustion and deforestation in the surrounding area, depleting the resources needed to sustain a large population. At the same time, the central authority that managed the complex gold trade network may have weakened, or the trade routes themselves shifted to favor other emerging centers. The city didn't burn. It was simply gradually depopulated over a century or two as people moved to more viable land. When European colonists encountered the ruins in the late 19th century, they refused to believe that Africans could have built something so sophisticated. They invented fantastical theories, attributing it to the Phoenicians, the Queen of Sheba, or other foreign civilizations, creating a racist mythology to explain away the evidence before their eyes. This willful misinterpretation was a different kind of vanishing act, an attempt to erase not the city, but the cultural achievement of its builders. The true story of Great Zimbabwe is one of indigenous African innovation and statecraft, and its decline is a powerful case study in the delicate balance between a civilization and its environment. It forces us to ask a deeply relevant question: how many of our own modern cities are vulnerable to a slow-motion crisis, not of conquest, but of resource depletion and economic shift? This process of myth-making around economically abandoned cities is a fascinating psychological phenomenon. A place that dies slowly doesn't provide a simple, dramatic story like a volcanic eruption or a battle. Its emptiness feels more intentional, more mysterious. Why would people leave such a grand place unless they were forced to by some unseen calamity, or unless they left something incredibly valuable behind? This void of explanation is filled with speculation. Petra became a supposed hiding place for Pharaoh's treasure. The empty stone enclosures of Great Zimbabwe were imagined to be the mines of King Solomon. The Anasazi cliff dwellings of the American Southwest, abandoned after prolonged drought in the 13th century, sparked stories of a mysterious, vanished race. The mundane truths of shifting trade, environmental degradation, and cultural migration are often less compelling than legends of cursed gold or ancient secrets. We seem to prefer a narrative of dramatic loss to one of slow, complicated decline, because it feels more final and somehow more honorable. These legends, while obscuring the historical truth, reveal our own deep-seated anxieties about sustainability and the legacy of our own endeavors. They ask us to look at a ruin and wonder not only what happened there, but what fragile pillars our own modern wealth is built upon, and what might remain of our cities when the rivers of commerce that feed them inevitably change their course. And it is this quest to separate the compelling legend from the complex truth that drives the next chapter in our story, the meticulous, often thrilling work of archaeology. For centuries, the stories of these vanished cities existed in a tantalizing space between whispered legend and unproven history. They were compelling narratives, but were they anything more? This is where the meticulous, often romantic, and always painstaking work of archaeology enters the stage, armed with trowels, satellite imagery, and a burning desire to peel back the layers of myth to find the truth beneath. The pursuit is a delicate dance, a constant negotiation between the thrilling possibilities of legend and the hard, physical evidence of the soil. It's a field where a single shard of pottery can dismantle a 1,000-year-old story, or where a laser scan from the sky can suddenly make a fable feel terrifyingly real. The archetype of the archaeological quest for a mythological city begins with a man of immense passion and questionable methods, Heinrich Schliemann. A wealthy German businessman obsessed with the Homeric epics, Schliemann became convinced that the Iliad was not just a poem, but a historical document. In the 1870s, he went to modern-day Hisarlik in Turkey, believed by some to be the site of ancient Troy, and he began to dig with a literal vengeance. His methods were, by modern standards, horrifyingly destructive. He used massive crews and crude techniques, blasting through what we now know were multiple layers of the city's history in his single-minded drive to find the Troy of King Priam. And then he claimed he found it. He unearthed a spectacular hoard of gold jewelry and artifacts, which he dramatically dubbed Priam's treasure. While his reckless excavation destroyed invaluable archaeological context, and he likely misidentified the layer belonging to the Homeric era, Schliemann achieved something profound. He proved that Troy was not a mere fantasy. There was a real, powerful city on that spot, one that had been destroyed by war and fire. His work, for all its flaws, forced the academic world to accept that epic poetry could contain kernels of historical truth, forever blurring the line between myth and history and opening the door for the serious study of legendary places. Modern archaeology has traded Schliemann's pickaxe for far more sophisticated tools, yet the core mission remains the same. Today's researchers employ a suite of non-invasive technologies that allow them to see what lies beneath the earth without ever breaking ground. Magnetometry measures slight variations in the Earth's magnetic field to map buried walls and hearths. Ground-penetrating radar sends pulses into the Earth to reveal subsurface structures. And perhaps the most revolutionary tool of the 21st century is LiDAR, which stands for light detection and ranging. This technology involves mounting a laser scanner on an airplane or drone and flying it over a dense landscape like a jungle canopy. The lasers can penetrate the smallest gaps in the vegetation, bouncing off the ground below to create an incredibly detailed, three-dimensional topographic map of the Earth's surface, effectively digitally stripping away the trees. This has been an absolute game-changer in places like Central America. In Guatemala, LiDAR surveys over the Maya region have revealed a staggering truth. What was once thought to be isolated city-states scattered through the jungle was in fact a vast, interconnected network of cities, farms, highways, and fortifications, supporting a population much larger than anyone had ever imagined. It showed that the Maya civilization was far more complex, interconnected, and populous than the old cities in a vacant jungle myth suggested. It didn't find a mythical city per se, but it completely reshaped our understanding of a real civilization that had itself become semi-mythologized. Despite these amazing technological advances, the archaeologist's quest is filled with profound challenges and ethical dilemmas. The search for a place like Atlantis, for instance, is often dismissed as pseudo-archaeology because it typically starts with the answer, the myth, and then seeks evidence to fit it rather than following the evidence where it leads. This can lead to the misidentification of natural geological formations as man-made structures and can overshadow the study of actual, verifiable history. Furthermore, the very act of discovery can be a double-edged sword. The moment a site is confirmed, it can be threatened by looters seeking valuable artifacts for the black market, their destructive digging obliterating the archaeological context that gives objects their meaning. There's also the critical question of cultural sensitivity. Who does the past belong to? The pursuit of El Dorado, for instance, is not just an academic exercise for many in South America. It's intertwined with the living heritage and identity of indigenous peoples. Archaeologists today understand they must work with local communities and descendants, not just extract knowledge from their land. Dr. Sarah Parcak, a space archaeologist who uses satellite imagery, often speaks to this tension, noting, "The technology is the easy part. The real work is in the collaboration, in ensuring that the stories we tell are not just exciting, but also respectful and inclusive of the people for whom these legends are a part of their heritage." The impact of these successful pursuits extends far beyond academic journals. The discovery of the real Troy ignited the public imagination and helped create the field of Mediterranean archaeology. The Lidia revelations in Guatemala have fundamentally rewritten the history of the Americas. Each time archaeology brings a legend into the light of history, it does more than just confirm a story. It deepens our understanding of human ingenuity, resilience, and ambition. It shows us that the people of the past were not primitive caricatures, but sophisticated societies capable of achieving greatness and suffering catastrophic collapse. The thrill of discovery is not just about finding gold or lost palaces. It's about making a connection across centuries, hearing the faint echo of a real human story in what was once dismissed as mere fantasy. This tangible power of discovery, of making myth real, is precisely what fuels our endless fascination with these tales and ensures they are continually reborn and reimagined in our own modern culture. The legends of these lost cities did not remain confined to ancient texts or dusty archaeological reports. They found a vibrant and powerful second life in the modern imagination, thanks to their adoption and adaptation by popular culture. From the pages of 19th century adventure novels to the immersive worlds of 21st century video games, media has become the primary vehicle through which most people encounter these mythological places, shaping our collective perception in ways both enlightening and distorting. This journey from sacred myth to blockbuster entertainment reveals as much about our own contemporary fears and desires as it does about the ancient stories themselves. The literary transformation began in earnest during the Victorian era, a time of global exploration and archaeological discovery. Authors like H. Rider Haggard and Jules Verne seized upon the public's fascination with the unknown. In his 1887 novel Haggard took readers to a lost African kingdom ruled by an immortal sorceress, tapping directly into Western fantasies of ancient, hidden wisdom and exoticism. But it was Verne who truly mastered the art of placing cutting-edge science into the heart of legendary settings. His Journey to the Center of the Earth, 1864, might not feature a named mythological city, but its depiction of a vast subterranean world with a primeval ocean and giant mushrooms created a template for the Lost World genre. He presented these places not through a lens of divine punishment, but as arenas for scientific curiosity and heroic adventure, reframing the myth for an age of industry and reason. This shift was profound. The lost city was no longer just a cautionary symbol. It was a destination, a puzzle to be solved by the brave and the brilliant. This adventurous spirit exploded onto the silver screen in the 20th century, finding its ultimate expression in the pulpy, thrilling serials of the 1930s and 40s, which directly inspired one of cinema's most iconic heroes. The Indiana Jones franchise, created by George Lucas and Steven Spielberg, is arguably the most influential modern purveyor of the Lost City myth. In Raiders of the Lost Ark, the quest is for a biblical artifact, but in subsequent films, the formula crystallizes around the search for legendary places. Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom involves a mythical Indian village and a sacred stone, while Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade is a direct hunt for a mythological place, the Grail Temple, a sanctuary guarding the Holy Grail that draws on Arthurian legends of healing and eternal life. These films are masterclasses in blending real archaeological detail with fantastical spectacle. They present the archaeologist as a swashbuckling hero, a lone figure battling Nazis and supernatural forces to reclaim a sacred relic for the good of mankind. This romanticized vision, while incredibly entertaining, creates a potent distortion. It often sidelines the collaborative, meticulous nature of real archaeology in favor of a narrative centered on individual genius and violent conquest, and it frequently perpetuates a colonialist trope where a Western hero enters a foreign land to appropriate its most sacred treasures, albeit with noble intentions. The evolution of these stories did not stop with film. The interactive realm of video games has become a new frontier for exploring mythological cities, offering an experience that is arguably more immersive than any book or movie. Games like the Tomb Raider and Uncharted series are the direct heirs to Indiana Jones's legacy, placing players directly in the boots of the explorer. In games like Uncharted, The Lost Legacy, players literally traverse the ruins of a lost Hoysala Empire city in India, solving environmental puzzles and fighting mercenaries to prevent a powerful artifact from falling into the wrong hands. This medium allows for a deeper engagement with the idea of the lost city. Players don't just watch Lara Croft discover a hidden mechanism. They are the ones who must find and activate it, feeling the direct thrill of revelation. This interactivity transforms the mythological city from a setting into a character in itself, a vast, ancient puzzle box filled with traps, lore, and secrets waiting for a protagonist, and by extension the player to prove their worth by unlocking them. This pervasive presence in media has a dual effect, as cultural critics often point out. On one hand, it preserves these myths for new generations, ensuring that the story of Atlantis or the concept of Shangri-La remains a vibrant part of our cultural vocabulary. It sparks curiosity, leading countless viewers and players to investigate the real history and folklore behind the entertainment. Yet, this process also inevitably distorts the original meaning. The complex, often somber moral lessons about hubris and divine retribution are frequently sanded down to serve a simpler narrative of good versus evil or a straightforward quest for a MacGuffin. The mythological city becomes a backdrop for a shootout or a vehicle for spectacle, its deeper symbolic resonance often diluted. This raises a compelling question about the nature of storytelling itself. When a centuries-old legend is repackaged as a summer blockbuster or a triple-A video game, does it lose its soul, or is it simply being reborn, adapting to fulfill the psychological needs of a new audience in a new time? The very fact that we continue to gravitate towards these stories, regardless of the medium, suggests they are answering a profound and enduring human need, a deep-seated appeal that goes far beyond simple entertainment. What is it that makes these stories of sunken empires and hidden valleys so incredibly persistent? Why do they resonate with such power across centuries and cultures, refusing to be dismissed by mere logic or a lack of evidence? The answer lies not in the soil of archaeological sites, but in the very wiring of the human brain. Our minds are not cold, objective data processors. They are meaning-making machines, constantly seeking patterns and narratives to explain the world around us. This innate drive is the fertile ground in which the seeds of myth take root and flourish. Cognitive psychologists point to a fundamental principle known as apophenia, the tendency to perceive meaningful connections between unrelated things. When we look at a complex rock formation that vaguely resembles a step, or a series of underwater lines that could be a road, Our brain doesn't just see random geology, it instinctively tries to assemble those fragments into a recognizable pattern, like a wall or a building. This isn't a flaw, it's a feature of human intelligence that helped our ancestors identify predators in the tall grass or find edible plants in a dense forest. But this same life-saving skill also makes us incredibly susceptible to seeing cities where there are only canyons and faces where there are only mountains. This deep-seated need for pattern recognition is powerfully coupled with what psychologists call existential escape. In a world that can often feel overwhelming, predictable, and even mundane, the idea that there are still vast, undiscovered wonders waiting just beyond the map offers a thrilling mental release. The legend of a place like Shangri-La isn't just a story, it's a psychological sanctuary. It provides a temporary escape from the pressures of modern life into a realm of pure possibility, where the rules of our ordinary existence no longer apply. It allows us to mentally check out from our daily routines and imagine a life of adventure, mystery, and profound meaning. This isn't about shirking responsibility. It's about fulfilling a fundamental human need for wonder and transcendence. Studies in narrative psychology show that engaging with these kinds of stories can actually boost creativity and problem-solving skills, as they allow our minds to explore scenarios and possibilities far outside the confines of our everyday experience. The myth becomes a kind of mental playground, a space where we can experiment with different ways of being and understanding our place in the universe. Furthermore, these stories provide something that raw data and historical facts often lack: a compelling and satisfying narrative arc. The human brain is wired for story. We understand the world through causality. This happened because of that. A simple list of events, like a volcano erupting and destroying a settlement, is a tragedy. But a story about a proud and advanced civilization that angered the gods with its arrogance and was therefore sunk beneath the waves as punishment, that is a morality tale. It provides a clear reason for the disaster, imposing a moral order on what is otherwise a random and terrifying act of nature. This narrative instinct is so strong that we often prefer a satisfying story, even if it's not entirely true, to a complicated and ambiguous set of facts. The myth offers a clean, emotionally resonant explanation for the gaps and silences in our historical record, filling the void of the unknown with a plot that makes sense on a deeply human level. It transforms chaos into cosmos, randomness into reason. This psychological landscape is also shaped by our relationship with the concept of the unknown itself. For many, the idea that everything has already been discovered, mapped, and explained can feel strangely limiting and even depressing. The myths of lost cities preserve a sense of mystery in the world. They sustain the enchanting possibility that there are still grand secrets left to uncover, that the age of exploration is not truly over. This belief can be a powerful motivator, driving real scientific inquiry and adventurous exploration. The dream of finding Atlantis has led to serious oceanographic surveys. The search for El Dorado, for all its darkness, ultimately mapped the Amazon. The psychological appeal is a self-fulfilling prophecy. The desire for mystery itself helps ensure that the pursuit of the unknown continues, blending the lines between romantic fantasy and genuine discovery. In the end, these enduring legends hold up a mirror to our own deepest needs for meaning, for wonder, and for a world that still holds the promise of magic just beyond the next horizon. This inherent tension between our psychological yearnings and the rigorous demands of evidence brings us to the crucial counterpoint: the scientific perspective that seeks to scrutinize these beloved stories with a more skeptical eye. While the stories of lost cities ignite our imagination and speak to deep psychological needs, the scientific community approaches these tales with a very different set of tools: skepticism, evidence, and a principle known as Occam's razor. This philosophical rule, attributed to the 14th century friar William of Ockham, suggests that the simplest explanation, the one that requires the fewest assumptions, is usually the correct one. When applied to mythological cities, this razor often slices through layers of fantasy to reveal a more mundane, yet still fascinating reality. The scientific perspective does not seek to destroy wonder, but to ground it in a disciplined search for verifiable truth, asking not what would be the most exciting explanation, but what the physical evidence actually allows us to conclude. Consider the sheer logistical challenge of a place like Atlantis, as described by Plato, an island larger than Libya and Asia Minor combined, supporting a sophisticated Bronze Age civilization with a massive navy, which then sinks into the ocean without a trace. Geologists point out that continents do not simply sink in a day and a night. The process of continental subsidence happens over millions of years, not within a human lifetime. Furthermore, oceanographers have meticulously mapped the seafloor. Satellites like Grace have measured the Earth's gravitational field in such detail that we can detect large, submerged massifs. If a continent-sized landmass had sunk in the Atlantic Ocean anytime in the last 100,000 years, its ghostly outline would still be visible in the topography of the ocean floor. Yet no such structure exists. The Atlantic Basin is a vast, deep plain, exactly as plate tectonics predicts it should be. As marine geologist Dr. Marc-André Gutcher explains, the geological evidence is overwhelmingly against a lost continent in the Atlantic. The story is a powerful allegory, but it simply doesn't hold water, so to speak, as a historical account. This reliance on empirical evidence is the cornerstone of the scientific method. For any claim, especially an extraordinary one, the burden of proof lies with those making the claim. To date, not a single artifact, inscription, or piece of building material that can be conclusively linked to Atlantis, Limuria, or a golden El Dorado has ever been found and verified by peer-reviewed science. Proponents often point to ambiguous underwater formations, like the so-called Bimini Road in the Bahamas, which was quickly identified by geologists as a perfectly natural example of beach-rock that fractures in straight lines. Other evidence often crumbles under scrutiny. The famous Peary Rise map, sometimes claimed to show Antarctica without ice, actually depicts a distorted South America, a common cartographic error of its time. These repeated dead ends lead scientists to a simple conclusion. Without concrete, verifiable evidence, these places must remain in the realm of myth. This isn't to say that scientists dismiss the cultural value of these stories. Many historians and archaeologists make a crucial distinction. While they may reject the literal existence of a specific mythological city, they deeply appreciate the myths themselves as invaluable windows into the cultures that created them. The story of Atlantis tells us less about a prehistoric civilization and far more about Plato's philosophical concerns in 4th century BCE Athens. The legend of El Dorado reveals the devastating collision between European greed and indigenous South American cultures. These narratives are cultural artifacts in their own right, rich with information about human fears, aspirations, and worldviews. The scientist's goal is not to ruin a good story, but to understand its true origin and meaning, separating the historical context from the literal claim. This disciplined approach acts as a necessary counterweight to the very human cognitive biases that make us so susceptible to these tales in the first place. Our pattern-seeking brains, so eager to find connections, can lead us astray, seeing faces in the clouds and cities on the ocean floor. Confirmation bias then takes over, causing us to selectively focus on anything that seems to support our desired belief while ignoring the mountain of evidence that contradicts it. Scientific skepticism is the tool we use to check these innate impulses, to ask the hard questions, and to demand a higher standard of proof. It encourages a healthy balance, a sense of wonder about the past, tempered by a rigorous commitment to the truth. This critical mindset is more important than ever in our modern age, where the line between myth and reality is constantly being tested by new stories that capture the public imagination in surprisingly familiar ways. The human impulse to dream of vanished civilizations did not fade with the age of exploration. It simply found new landscapes to inhabit. The ancient tales of Atlantis and Shangri-La have direct descendants in our modern world, thriving not in dusty scrolls but in the digital ether of forums, podcasts, and social media feeds. These contemporary myths, often dressed in the language of conspiracy theory, reveal that our need for mysterious, hidden worlds is as powerful as ever, simply updated with a technological veneer. Where once we spoke of cities sunk by the wrath of gods, we now whisper of advanced ancient races, interdimensional portals, and bases on the dark side of the moon. Consider the persistent legend of Agartha, a supposed vast subterranean world hidden deep within the earth. This myth, which gained traction in the 19th century through the writings of figures like Alexander St. Yves d'Alveda, is a perfect bridge between old and new. It reimagines the concept of a lost, advanced civilization not as sunken or distant, but as living literally beneath our feet, accessible through hidden entrances at the poles or in remote mountain ranges. In the 20th century, this was fused with UFO lore, giving rise to stories of inner Earth beings piloting flying saucers. Today, this narrative thrives online, with countless videos and posts purporting to show secret entrances or alleging that governments are hiding the truth of these underground networks. It is a classic mythological city archetype, a hidden, utopian society possessing ancient wisdom, repackaged for an audience fascinated by secrets and cover-ups. The digital age has acted as a massive accelerator and amplifier for these modern myths. The internet provides a fertile ecosystem where these stories can evolve, cross-pollinate, and gain legitimacy through the illusion of consensus. A lone individual's speculative YouTube video can be edited to appear compelling, shared across platforms, and picked up by algorithms that push it toward audiences already primed to believe. The flat, decentralized nature of online information also flattens expertise. As Dr. Joan Donovan, an expert on media manipulation and misinformation, has noted, the internet creates an environment where all knowledge claims are treated as equal. A peer-reviewed geological study on why a certain rock formation is natural can be dismissed in a comment section, while a heavily edited video claiming it's an ancient pyramid can be embraced as a brave revelation. This creates insulated communities where belief is reinforced through constant, algorithmically driven repetition, making these modern myths more resistant to debunking than their ancient counterparts ever were. The tools of their creation are also strikingly modern. Where ancient myths relied on oral tradition and the occasional embellished map, modern myths are built with Photoshop, CGI, and drone footage. A curious cloud formation becomes a cloaked UFO mothership hovering over a hidden city. LiDAR data from archaeological surveys is misinterpreted or intentionally misrepresented to show perfect geometric shapes where none exist. Google Earth becomes a digital scrying glass, with users spending hours scanning remote regions of Antarctica or the ocean floor, their pattern-seeking brains, a trait known as apophenia, connecting random pixels into the walls and streets of a lost metropolis. This process mirrors the way ancient sailors might have looked at a distant, mist-shrouded island and seen the glittering towers of a phantom city, proving that our fundamental cognitive hardware hasn't changed, only the resolution of the map has. So why do these narratives, from the ancient to the absurd, persist with such tenacity? The answer lies in the powerful psychological functions they serve. In an era of often overwhelming complexity, climate change, political instability, pandemics, the idea of a simple, hidden truth can be incredibly comforting. Conspiracy theories about hidden civilizations or ancient advanced technology provide a complete, alternative framework for understanding the world. They offer a sense of order and agency, suggesting that a powerful, intelligent group is in control, even if that control is malign. Furthermore, believing in these myths can be a source of identity and community. Being part of a group that knows the truth about the hollow earth or ancient aliens creates a powerful sense of belonging and superiority over the sheeple who accept mainstream explanations. It transforms the believer from a passive observer of a chaotic world into an enlightened insider on a heroic quest for hidden knowledge. This evolution from campfire tale to viral meme forces us to ask a profound question about the nature of storytelling itself. Has the core function of the myth fundamentally changed? In ancient times, these stories served as moral compasses, cautioning against hubris or expressing a yearning for paradise. Today, their function seems to have shifted more toward identity formation and explaining perceived power structures. Yet, the underlying engine remains the same, a deep, human need to fill the voids in our understanding with narratives that are more compelling, more meaningful, and more thrilling than cold, hard reality. We are still searching for that city on the hill, that shining beacon of a better or more mysterious world. The tools we use to search have changed from wooden ships to satellites, and the stories we tell have traded gods for aliens, but the longing in our hearts is ancient and unchanged. And this very human drive to seek, to believe, and to explore, regardless of the evidence, leads us directly to a critical modern dilemma. What are the real-world consequences of chasing these digital phantoms, and who pays the price when legend collides with reality? But the pursuit of these lost worlds is not a simple adventure without consequences. As the romantic image of the lone explorer fades, we are confronted with a far more complex and crucial question: what is the true cost of discovery? The field of archaeology, once the domain of treasure hunters and colonial collectors, is now grappling with profound ethical dilemmas that force us to reconsider the very purpose of uncovering the past. This is no longer just about finding a city, it's about understanding our responsibility to the cultures that built them and the descendants who keep their memories alive. The thrill of the hunt must be balanced against the imperative of preservation and respect. One of the most glaring examples of this ethical tension revolves around the ancient Inca citadel of Machu Picchu. Its spectacular rediscovery by Hiram Bingham in 1911 captured the world's imagination, but it came with a legacy of appropriation. Under the guise of scientific study, Bingham and his Yale University expedition excavated the site and exported over 40,000 artifacts, ceramics, tools, human remains to the United States, claiming Peru lacked the facilities to care for them. For nearly a century, these items remained at Yale, becoming the foundation of its South American collections, while Peru repeatedly requested their return. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was a pattern common in an era when archaeological finds were often treated as prizes for Western institutions. The dispute became a powerful symbol of post-colonial restitution, finally culminating in an agreement in 2010 for Yale to repatriate the vast majority of the pieces. This case forced a global conversation about who truly owns the past. Is it the international scholarly community, or the nation and the indigenous communities for whom these objects are not mere artifacts, but sacred links to their ancestors and living heritage? This question of ownership is at the heart of modern archaeological ethics. For centuries, the narratives surrounding lost cities were almost exclusively written by outsiders. Indigenous perspectives were ignored, and local knowledge was often exploited without credit or compensation. This approach is now rightly seen as a form of intellectual and cultural colonialism. Dr. Chip Colwell, a former curator who has written extensively on the restitution of cultural items, argues that the field must move beyond this extractive model. He states, archaeology was built on a foundation of taking. The ethical future of the field depends on building partnerships, on listening to descendant communities, and recognizing that their connection to these places is not historical, it is continuous and ongoing. This means that before a single shovel goes into the ground, researchers have an obligation to consult with local and indigenous communities, to seek their consent, and to ensure the work benefits them directly, whether through training, economic opportunity, or the revitalization of their own cultural knowledge. The physical act of exploration itself can also be a destructive force, even when intentions are good. The mere announcement of a potential discovery can act as a beacon for looters who descend upon a site to pillage it for valuable artifacts to sell on the black market. These looters are not careful excavators, they are destroyers. They tear through ancient walls, shatter pottery, and discard anything without immediate monetary value, obliterating the archaeological context that is essential for understanding an object's purpose, date, and significance. A gold statue sold on the black market is just a piece of metal. Stripped of its provenance, it loses almost all its historical value. This illicit trade, estimated to be a multi-billion-dollar industry, is a primary funding source for organized crime and even terrorism, making the protection of archaeological sites a matter of global security as well as cultural preservation. Furthermore, the growing popularity of sites like Machu Picchu presents a different kind of threat, the danger of being loved to death. The influx of hundreds of thousands of tourists each year, while economically vital, leads to erosion, pollution, and structural stress on ancient monuments. The very act of seeking wonder can inadvertently destroy the object of that wonder. This creates a nearly impossible balancing act for governments and conservationists between providing access and ensuring preservation. It forces us to consider whether some places might be too fragile for large-scale tourism, and if our desire to personally witness these legends must sometimes be secondary to the need to protect them for future generations. So where does this leave the modern-day explorer, whether a professional archaeologist or an armchair enthusiast? The goal is not to halt discovery, but to pursue it responsibly. This means shifting our mindset from one of extraction to one of collaboration. It means celebrating discoveries that are made with communities, not merely upon them. It involves using non-invasive technologies like LiDAR and ground-penetrating radar to map sites without disturbing them, preserving the integrity of the ground until a full, careful excavation is possible. And for us, the audience, it means being mindful consumers of these stories. We can support museums that engage in ethical practices and repatriate wrongfully acquired items, and we can approach these legends with a new awareness of the living cultures that are their rightful heirs. The greatest discovery we can make is not a city of gold, but a more respectful and sustainable way to satisfy our shared curiosity about the human story, ensuring that the search for lost worlds does not come at the cost of damaging the one we all share. If these vanished cities teach us anything, it is a humbling lesson in impermanence. Across continents and centuries, these stories echo with the same powerful themes, revealing that the greatest threats to civilization often come not from outside but from within. The most persistent of these warnings is the danger of hubris, the arrogant belief that we are masters of our domain, immune to the forces of nature or the consequences of our own actions. Atlantis, in its defiance of the gods, and Iram of the Pillars with its towering arrogance, were both said to have been erased for this very sin. Their legends serve as ancient, dramatic metaphors for a truth we are grappling with today, that a society focused solely on its own grandeur, one that believes it can engineer its way out of any problem without regard for balance or sustainability, is building on a foundation of sand. The historian Will Durant offered a chillingly simple observation on this cycle, noting that a great civilization is not conquered from without until it has destroyed itself from within. This isn't just about military conquest. It is about the slow erosion of the values and practices that keep a society resilient and adaptable in the face of change. Yet, intertwined with this warning is a parallel narrative of incredible resilience. For every story of a city swallowed by the sea, there is a counter-narrative of cultural survival. The physical place may vanish, but the idea, the memory, and the identity it fostered often endure with astonishing tenacity. The lost Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan is a powerful example. Its towering pyramids were torn down, its canals filled in, and a Spanish colonial city was built directly atop its ruins in a deliberate act of erasure. But the memory of that place, the glory of that civilization, did not die. It was preserved in oral histories, in clandestine rituals, and in the artistic traditions of its people. Centuries later, that memory resurfaced with tremendous power, fueling a cultural and political movement that sought to reclaim a pre-Columbian identity. This demonstrates that while stone and mortar are temporary, the stories we tell about ourselves are arguably our most durable construction. They are the seeds from which new understandings can grow, even after the most devastating collapse. This dance between collapse and endurance feels acutely relevant in our modern era. We face our own potential cataclysms, not from angry gods, but from the slow, cumulative impact of climate change, resource depletion, and unchecked urbanization. The parallels are too striking to ignore. Like the inhabitants of mythical Wise, we have built magnificent cities in vulnerable coastal areas, protected by complex systems of dikes and seawalls, perhaps nurturing a similar dangerous complacency. Like the Nabateans of Petra, our global economic system is precariously dependent on intricate networks of trade and resource extraction that could be disrupted by a shift in political or environmental currents. The philosopher George Santayana's famous warning that those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it is often invoked, but perhaps a more nuanced reading of these myths suggests that merely remembering is not enough. We must also learn to listen to the kinds of stories the past tells us. They are not simple records of events, but complex parables about human nature. So what then can we truly learn from these echoes? They compel us to ask difficult, introspective questions about our own trajectory. Are we building a civilization that is robust and flexible, or one that is rigid and brittle, optimized for short-term gain at the expense of long-term survival? Do our own myths, the stories we tell about progress, innovation, and endless growth, contain the same seeds of hubris that doomed the legends of old? The fate of the Maya cities, abandoned after prolonged drought, speaks directly to our current climate anxieties. It suggests that environmental change is rarely the sole culprit. It is the interaction between a changing climate and a society's inability or unwillingness to adapt that creates a true crisis. Their story is not one of a sudden apocalypse, but of a slow unraveling, a lesson in the vital importance of social and political resilience in the face of environmental stress. Ultimately, these lost cities hold up a mirror, and what we see reflected back is not just their story, but our own. They force a conversation about what we value and what we are willing to protect. The glittering dream of El Dorado reminds us that the pursuit of wealth without wisdom is a hollow and ultimately destructive endeavor. The serene ideal of Shangri-La challenges our frantic pace of life, asking if we have sacrificed peace and contemplation for mere productivity. These myths are far more than entertaining diversions. They are a deep well of human wisdom, a collective therapy session spanning millennia where we have worked through our deepest fears about mortality, community, and our place in the world. They don't offer easy answers, but they provide a profound context for our present moment, suggesting that the choices we make today will inevitably become the legends told by generations to come. These stories of vanished cities do more than just entertain us. They seep into the very bedrock of who we are, becoming powerful tools for shaping collective memory and forging a shared identity. A mythological city is rarely just a story about the past. It is a mirror that a community holds up to itself, a way of defining its values, its origins, and its place in the world. These legends become symbolic anchors, providing a sense of continuity and purpose that can unite people across generations, often serving as foundational narratives for modern nations and cultural groups. The search for a lost city, then, is often a search for a lost part of the self, a quest to validate a deeply held story about a people's history and destiny. We can see this powerful dynamic at play in the modern state of Israel, where archaeology and national identity are deeply intertwined. The pursuit of biblical cities like Jericho, Megiddo, and the City of David in Jerusalem is not merely an academic exercise. It is a foundational project for a nation whose legitimacy is rooted in ancient historical claims. The tangible discovery of a wall mentioned in the Bible or a seal bearing the name of a king from the Book of Kings provides a powerful, physical connection to a storied past, transforming scripture into documented history for many. This process of literally unearthing the past serves to strengthen the collective memory of a people, creating a continuous narrative line from the ancient kingdoms of Israel and Judah to the modern state. It answers a profound human need to belong to a place and to a story that stretches back through millennia, grounding a modern national identity in the sacred soil of antiquity. A parallel process unfolds in India with the ancient city of Dwarka. For centuries, the city described in the Hindu epic the Mahabharata as the magnificent, divinely created capital of Lord Krishna was considered a beautiful myth. The texts describe its eventual submersion into the sea following Krishna's departure from the world. For devout Hindus, this story is a core article of faith, a testament to Krishna's earthly presence. In recent decades, marine archaeologists have investigated the waters off the coast of modern-day Dwarka in Gujarat, uncovering submerged structures, pottery, and artifacts that some believe point to a historical counterpart to the legendary city. Whether the evidence conclusively proves the myth is almost secondary to its cultural impact. The very act of searching for Dwarka and the potential findings have electrified the public imagination, reinforcing a powerful narrative of India's spiritual heritage and ancient sophistication. It allows a billion people to point to a specific place and say, "Our story begins here," blending faith, history, and national pride into a potent collective identity. This phenomenon is precisely what scholars in the field of memory studies seek to understand. Academics like Jan Usman and Maurice Halbwach have explored how collective memory functions not as a perfect record of the past, but as a selective, often creative process. Societies choose to remember certain events and forget others, and they often shape those memories into narratives or myths that serve a present-day need for cohesion, meaning, and direction. As Usman argues, these foundational stories become cultural memory, a body of reusable texts, images, and rituals that are carefully maintained to convey a society's self-image across generations. A lost city is a perfect vessel for this kind of memory. Its very absence allows it to be idealized, its story refined and retold to embody the highest aspirations or the most cautionary lessons a culture wishes to impart upon itself. The city is no longer a place of stone, but a symbol in a story that defines a people. This leads us to a deeply personal question about the nature of identity itself. To what extent are we, whether as individuals or as members of a nation, defined by the stories we tell about our past? Is our understanding of history a sober assessment of facts, or is it a tapestry woven from both truth and myth, a narrative designed to make sense of our present circumstances and guide our future ambitions. The enduring power of these lost cities suggests that the stories we choose to believe about our origins are fundamental to our sense of self. They provide a map of where we came from and, by extension, a compass for where we believe we are going. This incredible power of narrative to shape reality ensures that these myths will never truly fade away. Instead, they will continue to evolve, finding new forms and new meanings in the imaginations of generations to come. As we stand at the intersection of an increasingly mapped physical world and a rapidly expanding digital frontier, the future of these mythological cities is poised for its most dramatic transformation yet. The very tools that have demystified our planet's satellite imaging, deep-sea submersibles, and ground-penetrating radar are now becoming the instruments for a new kind of myth-making, one that is less about discovery and more about immersive experience. Imagine slipping on a virtual reality headset and not just reading about Atlantis, but walking its concentric ringed canals, hearing the simulated roar of its crowds, and witnessing the sun set over its bronze statues before the ground trembles and the waves begin to rise. This is no longer the stuff of pure fantasy. Companies and cultural institutions are already beginning to leverage advanced three-dimensional modeling and historical data to create breathtakingly detailed virtual reconstructions of ancient sites, both real and legendary. These digital recreations offer a powerful new form of storytelling, allowing us to step directly into the myth and experience the grandeur and the tragedy of these places in a deeply personal, emotionally resonant way. This technological shift changes the nature of the quest from an external search across deserts and oceans to an internal journey of the imagination, fulfilling our need to witness the unwitnessable without ever disturbing a single grain of sand. Alongside this virtual exploration, the field of archaeology itself is on the cusp of revolutions that promise to blur the lines between legend and history even further. Advanced technologies like muon tomography, which uses cosmic rays to peer deep inside large geological structures, could one day reveal hidden chambers within the Great Pyramid or unmapped tunnels beneath the Rock of Gibraltar without any drilling or digging. Genetic ancestry tracing is allowing us to map ancient human migrations with unprecedented precision, potentially validating or debunking the origin stories of various cultures. As we sequence older and more degraded DNA from archaeological sites, we might find genetic evidence of a cataclysmic population bottleneck that could be the kernel of truth behind a global flood myth. Each of these advancements offers a new lens through which to examine our oldest stories. Futurist and author Dr. Amy Webb, who studies the long-term impact of technology, suggests that our tools are not just extending our senses, they are extending our mythology. We are building a bridge between the quantifiable data of science and the qualitative experience of story, creating a new space where evidence and imagination can coexist. This doesn't mean we will necessarily find Atlantis' zip code, but we will develop ever more sophisticated and compelling ways to interact with the idea of it, enriching the myth rather than simply proving or disproving it. Despite these technological leaps, the core human need that these legends fulfill remains stubbornly constant. In an era of artificial intelligence, climate anxiety, and global connectivity, the allure of the unknown persists with surprising vigor. Cultural analyst Maria Popova, who explores the intersection of science and poetry, argues that mystery is not the opposite of knowledge, but its frontier. In a world saturated with information, we crave meaning more than facts, and mythological cities provide a vessel for that meaning. They represent the ultimate blank space on the map, a psychological necessity in a world where few physical blank spaces remain. These stories allow us to ponder big, unanswerable questions about the rise and fall of civilizations, the ethical use of power, and the search for utopia, questions that feel intensely relevant as we grapple with the potential collapse of our own ecological and social systems. The myth of a sunken city becomes a powerful allegory for coastal metropolises threatened by rising sea levels. The story of a society that fell due to its own hubris resonates deeply in conversations about technological overreach or resource depletion. The legends are evolving to hold our modern anxieties, proving their timeless adaptability. This enduring relevance inevitably leads us to wonder what new mythological cities will emerge from the cracks of our own era. What stories are we crafting today that will captivate generations 1,000 years from now? Perhaps the seeds are already being sown in the rumors of secret underground bases, or in the Silicon Valley fantasy of a floating libertarian utopia in international waters. Maybe the myths of the future will center on the first Martian colony, a fragile bubble of life that fails and becomes a cautionary tale of interplanetary ambition, remembered as a ghost city silently orbiting the sun. Or perhaps our new myths won't be about places at all, but about digital spaces, a lost server holding a primordial version of the internet, or a corrupted AI that achieved consciousness and then vanished into the cloud, becoming a digital El Dorado that future coders will endlessly search for. The human mind has an inexhaustible talent for building castles in the unseen, and as our reality changes, so too will the forms of our fantasies. The specific stories may change, but the fundamental human yearning they represent for mystery, for meaning, and for a connection to something greater than ourselves is a constant, echoing through time as surely as the legendary bells of sunken wise. This timeless appeal ensures that long after our current maps are obsolete and our technology is archaic, we will still be telling stories of glorious cities that once were and dreaming of those that might yet be. What's truly astonishing is that these stories, born from cultures separated by vast oceans and thousands of years, are often built from the same narrative blueprint. A city of unimaginable splendor, a fatal flaw of pride or greed, and a catastrophic punishment that erases it from the earth. This is a story told by the ancient Greeks, by desert Bedouins, by Celtic bards, and by Himalayan monks. This remarkable similarity isn't a coincidence. It's a profound clue pointing to a shared human experience, a collective imagination that transcends geography and history. We see this pattern most vividly in the universal theme of the Great Flood. The story of a world-cleansing deluge appears in the Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh, in the biblical tale of Noah, in the Hindu scriptures of Manu, and in the Aboriginal Dreamtime stories of Australia. Just as these cultures all told of a great flood, they also told of a golden age that was lost, a paradise that humanity once possessed but through some error or arrogance allowed to slip through its fingers. The vanished city is simply the architectural expression of this lost paradise, a physical place we can yearn for and search for, making the abstract idea of a fallen golden age tantalizingly concrete. This is the domain of comparative mythology, a field dedicated to uncovering the common threads that run through the world's stories. The pioneering psychologist Carl Jung offered a compelling explanation for why these threads exist. He proposed the concept of the collective unconscious, a deep, inherited layer of the human psyche that is common to all people. Within this collective unconscious, he argued, reside archetypes, universal, symbolic patterns or motifs that shape how we experience and understand the world. The lost city, in this view, is a powerful archetype. It is the paradise lost, the utopia, the sunken kingdom. It represents an ideal state of being, a wholeness or perfection that we intuitively sense we have lost connection with. We don't need to be taught to understand the symbolic power of a sunken city of gold or a hidden valley of immortality. These images resonate with us on a primal level because they are already embedded in the shared architecture of the human mind. They are part of our psychological inheritance, beyond psychology, these parallels also point to shared human experiences with very real, traumatic historical events. Geologists now understand that the end of the last ice age, around 12,000 years ago, was a period of dramatic climate change and catastrophic sea level rise. Coastlines vanished underwater at an astonishing pace, and immense freshwater lakes burst their icy barriers, causing apocalyptic flooding across continents. It is almost certain that these events were witnessed by our ancestors and seared into our species' memory. The global prevalence of flood myths is likely the cultural echo of this shared trauma, a way for countless generations to process the terrifying power of nature that could wipe their homes from the map. The lost city, then, is not just a psychological archetype. It is also a fossilized memory of actual events, a story that has been passed down for millennia to explain why the world of our deep ancestors was so suddenly and violently transformed. When we step back and look at this global tapestry of tales, a beautiful and humbling picture emerges. The man searching for El Dorado in the Amazon, the monk meditating on the location of Shambhala in a Tibetan monastery, and the ancient Greek philosopher writing about Atlantis are all, in a profound sense, participating in the same human endeavor. They are all giving voice to a deep, shared longing for something more, for a world of greater wisdom, peace, or beauty that we feel must have existed somewhere, sometime. These stories remind us that despite our surface differences of language, custom, and belief, we are all united by the same fundamental dreams and fears. We all build civilizations, and we all live with the unconscious knowledge that they are fragile. We all imagine a perfect place, and we all tell stories about how it was lost. This interconnected web of myth is one of the strongest pieces of evidence we have for a common humanity, a shared narrative journey that began long before written history and continues to shape who we are today. Recognizing this deep connection allows us to appreciate these stories not as isolated curiosities, but as chapters in a single, epic story, the story of us. And so our journey across the map of myth and memory draws to a close. We have wandered through sunken streets and scaled the walls of cloud-shrouded citadels, from the philosophical depths of Atlantis to the golden mirage of El Dorado, from the spiritual sanctuary of Shangri-La to the submerged bells of Wise. What began as a collection of tantalizing stories reveals itself as something far greater, a profound and universal human endeavor to make sense of our own existence. These legendary cities are not mere fictions. They are powerful alchemical blends of historical truth and boundless imagination, where a real volcanic eruption becomes a parable of divine wrath, and a sacred ritual transforms into a feverish quest for infinite wealth. They vanish for every reason we fear most: the unchecked forces of nature, the devastating consequences of our own hubris, the slow unraveling of economic ties, or the brutal clash of conquest. Yet, in their vanishing, they achieve a strange and powerful immortality, forever cemented in our art, our literature, and our shared dreams. The true power of these places lies not in their location, but in their lasting impact. They are the mirrors into which we have gazed for millennia, reflecting our deepest anxieties about power and morality, our most hopeful yearnings for peace and understanding, and our insatiable curiosity about the blank spaces on the map and in our own history. They remind us of a dual truth: the breathtaking creativity of the human spirit to build, to imagine, and to story tell, and the heart-wrenching fragility of all we create. Every civilization is, in the end, a sandcastle at the edge of the sea, and these myths are the stories we tell about the magnificent castles that came before, lessons etched not in stone, but in the very air we breathe. The poet T.S. Eliot once wrote, "We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time." This, perhaps, is the ultimate secret these cities hold, Our endless quest for them through ancient texts across desolate landscapes and within the digital realm ultimately leads us back to ourselves. We discover that the real treasure is not a hoard of gold at the end of the journey, but a richer, more nuanced understanding of our own heart, our capacity for wonder, for folly, for resilience, and for belief. These lost cities are a permanent part of our human heritage, a testament to the fact that our greatest creations are often the stories we leave behind. Now we want to hear from you. Which of these mythological cities captures your imagination the most? Do you believe there is a kernel of truth waiting to be found in any of them, or is their power purely symbolic? Share your favorite myths and theories in the comments below. We love reading your thoughts and diving into these conversations with you. And if you enjoyed this exploration into history's greatest enigmas, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss our next adventure into the unknown. Thank you for watching, and never